Okay, so let's get started. We're going to be taking a look at working with individual cylinder trim programming found in our Link G5 and G4X systems. We'll find that the individual cylinder trim programming allows us to go and offset fuel and spark timing for a particular cylinder that may be problematic. So, for example, most engines will have some type of a flow imbalance in the intake manifold design, meaning the airflow that comes into the engine isn't going to be equally shared across all the cylinders. This can lead to problems with a particular cylinder running lean compared to others. A leaner cylinder is more prone to knock. So we have the ability to go in and richen up a particular cylinder and also detune that cylinder with spark timing. So we can retard spark timing on a cylinder that's problematic. So we have a lot of flexibility in the programming. We're going to take a look at how to set up a three-dimensional table for going in and correcting a potential knock problem on an engine. We actually have a nice data log example so we can see what this looks like and what we need to pay attention to in order to correct things, again, on a cylinder-to-cylinder basis. Now, one thing I want to mention before we even go into doing any setup and tuning within the individual cylinder trims, the best way to really go about doing any fuel tuning when we're talking about the individual cylinder trims is to have a lambda sensor per cylinder. That way you can actually compare all the cylinders to each other. You can figure out which is the leanest or the richest and make adjustments in an individual cylinder trim format. If you do not have a wideband per cylinder, I would not recommend to go in and start adding fuel in specific cylinders because you have no real conclusive way to measure what the deviations per cylinder are going to be. Now we can look at spark plugs in a cylinder and kind of gauge if it's rich or lean. You can go in and offset with that cylinder, but without that wideband, you're really just guessing as to how far things are off and how much correction needs to happen. We can use the individual cylinder trims, in my opinion, for detuning a cylinder that's showing knock problems. That's really what I heavily use the individual cylinder trims for, but fueling wise, I wanted to mention that the best way to go about, the most conclusive way to go about going in and working with a fueling offset is to making sure you have a lambda per cylinder. And that's not the case for most engines. I rarely get an engine that's fitted with a wideband per cylinder. It's definitely the best way to tune, but it's obviously very costly and it's just something that most people don't have. It's not a common thing. So let's jump in and take a look where we can find our individual cylinder trim page within our layout here. So we're going to go up into our fuel tab. That's where I'm sitting in right now. And we're going to go across to our cylinder T or cylinder trims. Now in this window, everything kind of blown up pretty large so we can fit everything so we can see all the various ignition trim tables that we could work with. If we take a look, we're going to see here on the side, we have our individual cylinder ignition trim and then our individual cylinder fuel correction. So this allows us to either go in and offset spark timing or offset fuel in a cylinder or a combination of both. Let's first just take a look at working with the fueling correction. It's really going to be the same idea as our ignition correction. So if we can kind of get that out of the way, this is what I typically don't use with the Link. Again, if I don't have a wideband per cylinder, I don't have a conclusive way to know how much I have to offset in a particular cylinder compared to others, but we have the ability to do this. So let's take a look. So if I click on this, we're going to see, in this case, do we want a single, a table, or disabled option? Single means that we have just a singular one-dimensional value that will apply a correction on that individual cylinder. So this would apply for idle, part throttle, or wide open throttle. So it's going to apply everywhere. The table allows us to be more specific with this and get creative of how we actually apply that correction. So for example, idle and part throttle, you may not want to have any correction applied in a particular cylinder. But at full throttle, you may want to have that offset applied, which is typically the case if we're talking about a fueling correction, but doesn't necessarily mean to be that specific. Maybe we might want to apply it across all of the operation points for a particular cylinder. But table is what I recommend to use here. So I'm going to go ahead and enable that and click OK. Now, let's go ahead and let's click OK here. Let's click yes. The setting is used for experienced users only. Do you want to continue? Yes, we do. Now, how many cylinders you have to create tables for depends on how many cylinders you've assigned. Obviously, if you have a 4-cylinder engine, under basics here, we have cylinders for, I have it defined as a 4-cylinder. I only have 4 tables for adjustment. Obviously, you're not going to have more than 4 cylinders if you've specified that. So jump back into our cylinder trims. Now, we have the cylinder 1 allocation. If we go here, this is going to be applying cylinder 1 fuel trim table. So typically, if we want to enable this, let's go ahead and just do these for all of the tables. So if I have a 4-cylinder engine Cylinder 1 allocation is tied to cylinder 1 fuel trim table. That's going to be here, fuel trim cylinder 1. That's going to be our table right here. So if I click OK, click yes, and we'll go to the next one. We'll click cylinder 2 allocation to cylinder 2 fuel trim table. Click yes. Do the same thing for 3. Let's go in here, select 3 to 3, and then finally 4 to 4. And we'll click yes. Now, the next step here to take a look at the actual table of what we can work with here in a three-dimensional format. We're going to unlock in our window here, and we're going to double click in this little grid icon, which brings in our table. And we're going to do that for cylinders 2, 3, and 4. So we're going to unlock, double click, lock that back again, unlock right here, double click, and let that table pop. Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here, and you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.